as a therapist and as an English teacher as a second language. So I'm Polish originally, and I'm teaching Polish and sometimes non-Polish people English as a language. What I notice is that there's a lot of correlation between learning a new language and acquisition of a new language and actual healing. And of course, these are two separate settings, very different settings. However, the human pattern really looks very similar, because both of these, healing and learning a new language, they involve learning. When you are healing, you're learning emotional regulation, you're learning about your brain's predictions, you're learning a lot of things around neuroscience and your own psychology, and then you're putting that knowledge into practice. And that exactly the same goes to learning a new language. So you're studying grammar, you're studying vocabulary, idioms, phrases, all the things that you need to acquire, the knowledge that you need to acquire to start practicing, and then you practice in real life with real people or with your teacher. Now, there are two mistakes that I notice that people are making, and I want you to become aware of them, because they're going to reduce the pressure and urgency that you put on yourself, and will free you from a lot of fear and shame that you might be feeling, and will actually propel your healing journey. So mistake number one that I really see people are repeating again and again is basically mistaking fear or mistaking their own shame, because there's a lot of fear and a lot of shame cropping up in both therapy and in language learning. They are mistaking that fear, those feelings of fear, those feelings of shame, for their inability to do something. So for example, I'll have a student who will know the grammar rules, who will know a lot of vocabulary, because let's say they already read books in English, but when I ask them just a simple question like, how was your weekend? They freeze and they stumble. They don't really know how to express themselves naturally and spontaneously. And that exactly the same goes to my clients who will come to a therapeutic session. They will know all the, the psychological language, and they will know their, their trauma. They know the history of their trauma. But when it comes to the difficult conversation that they know they need to have, let's say with a partner or with a friend, they are still withdrawing. They are still reverting to automatic responses. And this is because what is happening is that your brain detects social evaluation. And for a lot of people, social evaluation, depending on the environment that you had been brought up in, that social evaluation is threatening. So your brain temporarily almost like shifts resources towards detecting danger rather than performing complex thinking. That's why you're suddenly freezing, because you're like, oh, what I was doing this weekend? You're scared to say something in English, and also you're scared in the same scenario when actually you're like, oh, I need to now place a boundary. Oh, how do I do that? And then, so the complex thinking switches off, the danger, the stress parts of your brain are being activated, your amygdala and other emotional salience regions, and your prefrontal cortex is not working to its best capacity. And the prefrontal cortex is responsible for your strategic complex thinking. So in everyday language, basically, your brain is not really asking you, oh, which tense is correct, or why do I, set a boundary, but is actually asking you, am I safe? Am I safe to actually speak up? Am I safe to place that boundary? So whether that goes for the attachment style, or whether that goes to, expressing yourself in a new language, this is, as you can see, this is a very similar brain, I would say, regions that are lighting up. And I want you to really give yourself some time to actually practice the new skill. So practice the skill of setting a boundary gracefully, because sometimes we can do that in an awkward way, and that's okay. You never practiced that before, so you're learning. Then learning, new grammatical structure, new vocabulary. Give yourself grace. People have to understand that learning it requires you to fail a lot before that practice becomes natural for you. So practice is needed, and practice happens through you accepting that you will make mistakes. inevitably you will. So that's mistake number one. And I want you to really almost like embrace those feelings of fear, embrace those feelings of shame. That is you practicing the courage to speak up for yourself, to express yourself in a new language, or if that goes to therapy, like I said, expressing, let's say, a new boundary. Now, mistake number two is basically people are waiting to feel confident before practicing. This is you procrastinating. This is literally you procrastinating. So this is such a big trap that I see my students and I see my clients in. So they will tell me I need to have more vocabulary, my grammar needs to improve. And for my therapeutic clients, they'll think like, no, I need to feel less anxious. No, I actually need to know more about my trauma. I need to dig more about, around my childhood. No, you have to start practicing. Practice will give you confidence, not the other way around. Confidence is not born out of nothing. Confidence is born out of practice. And I think, for example, probably that's why I would say healing was sometimes way less, I would say, difficult for me, because I already had so much practice in learning language, and because English is my second language, I had been put in environments when I barely understand the word, even though I already had some basic knowledge around English. But because with the native speakers you have different accents, you suddenly like, oh my God, you're on a deep end. And I think and I still managed to express myself. I still managed, to find jobs and stuff like that. So that was okay. But it is so difficult sometimes to use all the knowledge that that you have and put it into practice in real life stressful situations. And that exactly the same goes to therapy. And I remember the amount of times I had been struggling, let's say, with boundaries, but I was just remembering that this is exactly the same as it with learning a new language, with when I was, struggling, let's say, with different accents when I was learning English. So it's almost like, think about that your brain, each time you do something new, your brain updates the prediction. And this is the neuroscience. So this is not some fluffy stuff, but this is the neuroscience of learning, so to speak. So every time you have a new experience, so let's say you set a boundary and that boundary is respected, your brain is now predicting not, oh, my boundaries are disrespected. No, your boundaries might be disrespected by some people, but you still can absolutely hold them, and you can just walk away from the situations when your boundaries are not respected. And that exactly the same goes, to learning a language. You keep on practicing until your brain starts predicting new things for you. So until your brain is almost like get used to setting a boundary, and that is an automatic response. So your brain starts getting used to having natural conversations, let's say, with English native speakers or any language that you are learning, and the native speaker could be, anyone. Just put the different language in there, and you feel confident, you feel secure within yourself. So I want you to really start thinking about healing in terms of you learning new skills, because, like I said, from my experience as both as a teacher and as a therapist, and I had been teaching way longer than I was actually, because I had been practicing therapy for almost a decade, but teaching goes I started teaching English when I was still a teenager, wanted to make some extra money, so that was that. And then I just kept on doing that. And I also finished the degree, obviously, to keep on practicing teaching English as a second language. So I want you to really start thinking about your healing in a new way, in a more objective way, in a more neuroscientific way, because that really does remove the shame, that really does remove the fear. And then you can start really thinking, okay, do you know what? If I'm going to make a mistake, nothing bad's going to happen. And a lot of you are so scared of making the mistake that you are almost like, well, you are thwarting the new experiences that you could potentially have in new situations, and actually show your brain that you can do certain things, and yes, you can develop, and yes, you can learn, and yes, you can evolve, and yes, you can heal, because the neuroscience proves that again and again and again. And that is something that I saw in my clients. That's also something that I saw in my students when they had been flourishing from, let's say, A1 beginner level English to A2 and or to B1. These are like, the steps in learning the language. And that is exactly the same goes to my clients in therapy when they moved from, let's say, CPTSD to actually having nurturing relationships with other people, being able to set boundaries, being able to stop people pleasing and actually prioritize themselves and their needs, but also extending that naturally towards other people. So I trust that that was helpful. If you want to book a therapeutic session with me, you've got the links down below. When it comes to learning a language, I'm already booked up when it comes to that. So sorry, I cannot offer this. Otherwise, like, share, and subscribe if that was helpful. And I'm going to see you in my next video. Bye bye.